is sick, so I moved Tammy over. But you could actually go over there because Sydney's not here. So there's, right, you're not gonna be able to see that. So Joe is over there, but he didn't want to. Gotcha. So you're free to.
There's a method
Sounds like all of it. Oh shit, okay. You were just being kind, I appreciate that. So Mela, Joe moved so he could see the presentation. If you want to do the same thing and then move back, you can. Or stay right there, it's all good. Okay. That's, you saw it when you got here?
I did, yes. With a minute and a half to spare.
Sure, I was over next week, but I moved.
And I stayed in Sweden.
And the roads were clear.
They were great.
As opposed to
We really thank my husband for that. So he's at home finishing all the charts and stuff. And he didn't understand that no, his should last.
good.
Gabby, you have Wi-Fi, obviously. Oh, I do down too. Just have to wait a little bit. I don't have to borrow yours, thank you. Turn it out.
Well, it appears that we do have a quorum at this point, and it is 6 o'clock, so I would like to call to order the 11th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and if Kyle could lead us in the pledge, that would be most appreciated.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So you'll notice that our agenda looks a little different this evening. Tonight is our inaugural budget work session embedded in tonight's meeting as well. And from a process standpoint, we'll begin these meetings with the budget work session, and those particular details will be indicated on the agendas. We also have a couple other improvements to the process. Certainly there was feedback last year about the accessibility of the various budget documents and the timeline on those documents being accessible. So as we move through this process, board members have a slightly smaller binder this year containing all the budget information as it exists today. That same information will be accessible on the district website. There will also be a link there, and I'm sure Superintendent Ed will show us that in her presentation for community members to send along questions as you review the budget information, so we are best able to answer those questions as we move along through the process. I am going to check one item off the list, 2.1.1 initial budget books. Board members will find that you have received those, so that information is in your homework pile now. What we'll do this evening, we'll receive an overview of the budget. Each of our administrators and directors will present executive summaries. Those board members have those. They'll hit high points that aren't. We're certainly not expecting everyone to read every last word of those executive summaries, but hit the high points, and if folks have questions. We'll also, you'll notice another change from last year's process, 2.1.3, public comment on the budget. That's specific to the budget. And that gives folks an opportunity to speak to that process. We will continue to have, you'll see it on tonight's agenda as number 4, and that's public comment, and that will certainly accommodate issues that are not budget specific. So we'll move on to 2.1.2, and that is superintendent overview of the proposed fiscal year 24 budget.
Thank you. So I'm going to use my teacher voice. If people can't hear me, let me know, but I think it still works, even though I have not been in a classroom in a while. So we have, the administrative team and the directors and I have been spending a significant amount of time putting this proposal together. I did give you a heads up a couple weeks ago about the challenges that we are facing going straight into that. So certainly we'll go over those challenges again to make sure that people have an opportunity to really understand them. And we made changes just yesterday, I think, so it is an ongoing process, and I want to make sure that you understand that throughout this month, through April 6th, we'll be making adjustments and bringing them to your attention, certainly taking direction from you all as we move forward. So feel free to stop me at any point as I go through this. If you look at tonight as sort of like a, in teacher world, it's a pre-reading strategy, it's sort of a hook, like you haven't had a chance to do any of the reading yet, right? So we're not expecting you to know any of this, it's all in there. So we're trying to give you those highlights, those things, so that when you go through these materials, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's what they said to pay attention to this, we want to just draw your attention to it, okay? So what I wanted to do was sort of bring back the goals of the strategic plan. And this is not something that I have spent a lot of time working with you on during this year, but it is a plan that was provided to me when I was hired as something that was very valuable and important to the community. So it is something that has been part of our working administrative team throughout the year. So I want to just remind you of a couple things. And these words are very small, don't worry. I'm just going to highlight some of it. So goal number 1 is about providing positive, safe, supportive learning environments. Number 2 is making sure that students regularly experience collaborative and experiential instructional practices. So that's about what's happening in the classroom every day. That they are able to participate in rigorous educational program that includes a variety of curricular and extracurricular offerings. Recruitment and retention of highly qualified, effective staff. That has been an ongoing conversation that we've had this year. That kids will have a shared set of outcomes that our students are expected to learn and how we're measuring them. And I know that Teresa has been working on curriculum and providing some of that information to the committee. Developing increasingly positive relationships among schools, parents, and community, and a safe and clean environment, both in schools, on school grounds, and on buses. So we think there are parts of this plan where the budget, we have paid attention to that and tried to make sure that we're continuing to move ourselves forward, but also in a responsible manner. So let me just provide you a little bit of context. This is this is information from the Department of Education, and I'm providing this information first to just make sure that we're clear. This is per pupil expenditures around districts that are around us. So it's Auburn, Lewiston, RSU 16-4. It's also the state average. You can see that 52, the per pupil expenditure in FY22, which is the most recent data available from the DOE, was $16,384. The state average is $18,000, and that's putting us on the lower end of that group of schools that are sort of geographically around us. I offer this because I think it's a good indication that prior to my arrival, at least, I think it seems that this district has tried to be fiscally responsible, try to not sort of outspend their neighbors, try to be within range of what our neighbors are doing, and through FY22, it appears that that is the case. I think it's also important to recognize that we're not offering the Cadillac. I threw in Greeley in there just so people could see what they spend down in Cumberland County, which is $20,000 a kid, just so everyone knows. I just like to do that sometimes. So for budget context, in terms of our enrollment, it's actually pretty steady. We had a huge drop, as you know, during the pandemic, but this year saw a significant rebound. So we're back to that sort of fairly consistent right around 2,000 kids. This year we're at 1982. We might be a little bit above that. I haven't checked that. That's the October 1 number. So it feels like a good sort of like return to what is a normal year-to-year number for us. And that's important because the funding from the state is all dependent on the kids that we have in our classrooms. And then lastly, this is also data that I got from the DOE. This is the percent of our teachers with less than 3 years of experience. So the first number is back in 17-18. I wanted to go prior to pandemic, like, okay, back when there was maybe a normal times is what we say them. And we were at 12%. The state average was 13. In 21-22, the state was still at 13%. We were up to 15, and now we're at 18%. I offer that context because I think it is good in terms of helping us to understand the staff that we have and the work that we need to do with them to help them to grow and to make sure that the work they're doing with our kids is the best that they can do. And we spent a lot of time talking about the instructional coaches this year, and that is really a significant amount of their work, is working with those new teachers, whether they're new to the profession because they're changing careers, or whether they're straight out of college and it's their first job. Either of those groups of people need that support and that help. If they don't feel successful, they're not going to stay. They're not going to stay in the profession, never mind whether or not they stay at our schools. So that's an important data point for us to have in mind as we move forward. Okay, so we have a really long list of challenges, so let me just share them with you. So, utilities, fuel, liability insurance. So unfortunately we got news today that the liability insurance is probably going to be higher than what we have budgeted for right now. It's probably an increase of another 3 to 5%. We just got that information before we came over here, so we haven't adjusted that. But we're like everybody's household, right? Fuel, I mean, all those things are increased. My CMP bill jumped by double just last month, right? And so all of us are feeling that. We have a contract for electricity, but that's going to end, and so we're going to see that increase as well. So right now we're looking at increase just for that of $121,800. We have an increase in workman's compensation, $45,000. We are budgeting for 2 purchases of 2 buses. Salaries and health insurance. Right now, we are budgeting a 10% increase in health insurance. This is a standard budgeting number that school districts use because we don't know what that number will be. But between those two, the vast majority of our budget is human capital, it's people. It's the work that happens every day to get kids to school safely, to provide them with an environment in which they can learn, to make sure that they're getting high quality instruction. And so that's a significant amount of our budget. I think I said, I don't know if I said it at a board meeting or in other places, but when you look at the DOE, you can see about 80% of our budget is people. So that salary increase comes with that as well. I shared this with the board at the last meeting, but I'll go over it again. We have lost the opportunity for additional subsidy because our economically disadvantaged student numbers are down. And that is a direct result of free lunch for the entire state. Those states that have also continued free lunch similar to Maine are feeling the same issue. So this is not an issue that's unique to our district, unique to our state. People at the DOE say they're working with federal officials to work on other ways to be able to measure what that economic disadvantage may be within our communities, because I'm not sure any of us really believe that magically those numbers have gone down without, just because we're not measuring them that way. So that's impacted our subsidy and what the state provides us. We've got an increase in students who need specially designed instruction, special education, and our towns are worth a lot more than they were last year, $69 million more. And when the state sees that number, the state says those communities can afford to spend more on education. And so that shift is where they take away money because they expect the towns to come up with that. Those are things that are just realities right out of the starting gate. So our initial proposed budget, if you look at the bottom, the number is $32,823,802. This is $2,555,000 up from last year, or an 8.44% increase. I'm going to draw your attention to a couple areas where it's most significant. The 2 highest, special ed, adult ed is up, but that, we'll explain that. It's a little bit different, but that number, it's only 23,000 compared to these other ones. So, but in terms of where the biggest increase is, special education, and that is directly related to the services that we need to provide students, and in facilities and maintenance, and that is a result of not taking care of things and needing to start building back into the budget those things that we need to start dealing with in our facilities. The next 2 areas that see the highest increase, regular instruction, that's directly related to salaries for teachers and ed techs. And where's the next one? Student, staff, and support. That is where guidance lives, nurse lives, technology lives. So we are going to be seeking to continue with our one-to-one technology that we have, and that is going to be looking at technology devices for kindergarten and third grade to begin a process of rotating every year. So we're going to go into all the details, but I just wanted to highlight to you where we're seeing those biggest increases. So I wanted to give you this graphic to make sure that you recognize 76% of our budget is in schools. So this is regular instruction, special ed, other instruction, which is guidance, nurse, technology, students and staff support, school administration. Those are all of that is what's happening in the school every day. 76% of that budget. You can look, system administration is 2.3%. That's us in the central office, the business office. Transportation and facilities, debt service is a small portion of this. So I think for us it's really important because I think a budget reflects your values, and we want to make sure that as much money is going into schools as possible, and I think this graphic kind of gives you that visual that that's where we are putting our priorities. So we started with a maintenance of effort budget, and what that means is, okay, given the programs we are running now, how do we just keep them going? We're not adding anything new. And so the biggest changes there are the staff salary, health insurance increases. Last year, instructional coaches were added to each building. 3 of those positions were funded out of grant funds. So this year, we want to bring those positions out of grant funds. And then the one-to-one technology devices for kindergarten and grade 3. So prior to the pandemic, the district, and this was part of the strategic plan, the district was committed to providing improved and upgraded technology in all of the schools. The one-to-one devices at the middle school and the high school had been in place a lot longer than that. And so the pandemic sped that up, right? Because simply had no choice, and then the funding was available. So we were able to purchase one-to-one devices for all of our students. We are now at the place where those devices are end of life and we need to purchase them ourselves. And so the decision was made at the elementary level that those have become essential pieces of how we do our instruction with our students. And the principals are going to talk about that more when we get to the specific presentations, but that is a little bit more than $100,000 of the budget. So we also have some population changes and some budget concerns that have impacted this. So we've reallocated 2 teacher positions. These are open positions at Green Central School. So we're not transferring any teachers. The first one, Turner Primary School's first grade, is very large. Next year's first grade. Their kindergarten has 5 teachers, where's Kim? 5, and there's only 4 in first grade, so we need 5 first grade. So we're going to transfer a teacher from Green to Turner Primary. And the high school is picking up at least maybe, gosh, what's the number, 20 kids with IEPs? So we are transferring an open position for special education resource to, oh no, that's not the resource one, is it? Okay. Rebecca will explain it better than I will. So we're transferring a special ed teacher to the high school to respond to those needs. So those are not new positions, and both of them are open. So we don't, there's no teacher transferring. This budget reflects the reduction of 2 teachers at the high school. Those teacher positions have not been identified yet. Edvin is going to talk about that, but that will be done through his scheduling process where he can determine where the least impact on students will be. But those 2 teacher positions are already reflected as a reduction in the budget. So we have increased student needs. So we do have some new positions that are in here. The first is Tripp Middle School. They are picking up a 7th grade class. I think when Jana did her presentation a couple months ago, noted the 7th grade class is up by about 25 to 30 students. Next year, 7th grade, the 6th grade is a bubble group within the district, so she needs an additional teacher to deal with class sizes. Turner Primary has seen an increase in students who have IEPs. They need an additional special education teacher. And we have put 3 additional Ed Tech 2s into the budget, 1 at Turner Primary, 1 at Turner Elementary, and 1 at Leeds. I will say, and Rebecca will go over this as well, this was not the initial request. The request was for 6. We've put in 3. And so Rebecca will talk about what is not in there. But again, as we deal with student needs and budget pressures, that was the compromise we came to. But that is the reality of it, and Rebecca will go over that. And then also as part of our contempt and responding to teacher retention and supporting teachers, especially special education teachers. Part of Rebecca's budget will go over that we want to provide secretarial support for teachers. So at the school level to help with the very significant part of their workload, which is paperwork and compliance with federal guidelines and laws. So Rebecca will talk about how that funding is, but there is some impact to the budget by doing that as well. So there is only really two new things, brand new, we don't have this, two things that we are proposing. And the first one with the most significant price tag of $114,000 is a district school resource officer. I feel like it's essential. This is my proposal that I will to share with you. We are in a district where there's no local police department. We are covered by just the regional sheriff's department coverage, and a close working relationship with the sheriff's department, with law enforcement, it can be a really, really important way for schools to respond to students. So one, increasing our coordination with them for our emergency planning, right? Just making sure that they know. Some of the things, the conversations I've had this year are about if the sheriff's department knows what your plan is, then they know how to respond appropriately. When people say, shouldn't we be doing X, shouldn't we be doing Y? And the sheriff's department says, as long as we know what you're doing, then that's the biggest help to us. Helping our schools run tabletop exercises, planning, making sure things are planned. Those are things that are really outside of the expertise of the training that most of us have had, and yet it is now part of our job description. And I feel like responsibly, this is an important piece. When the hoax swatting events happened all over Maine a couple months ago, where there was a hoax about school shooters, every superintendent that shared what they learned from that talked about the relationship with their SRO and how important that was in responding to that and helping kids and families feel safe. And it felt like it just reinforced to me what I feel like is a hole in the process that we have here. It's also super helpful in terms of supporting student attendance, dealing with students who we don't know where they are, or they're just not coming to school, truant, chronically absent, whatever that may be. Those home visits can happen even at a more regular basis with a dedicated resource officer. And then prevention and intervention services to students. My last principal job, I had a school resource officer, and that person became a trusted figure for students to tell them about crimes that they were either victims of, saw, or had occurred in their families, and they had not reported. And so it became a way for us to learn about what they needed and how to provide that to them. So that proposal is in the budget. And then the second proposal that has a much smaller price tag is to split the transportation director and maintenance director position into two different positions. Right now we have one, we've had one for a long time. I'm very aware, as people have educated me about the district, that this has been a conversation that's been had over the years multiple times. We need to improve leadership stability in both of those departments. That is 100% necessary to make sure that the budget can be managed and that we have resilience in those departments. We need to develop a long-range capital improvement plan that we can see through. We've got them, but we've had so much turnover that that's been difficult to really make sure that we're following through on them. We need to provide consistent support and supervision for the transportation staff. I will say these two jobs could not be more fundamentally different. The transportation director position is a day-to-day hands-on management of adults as they support and help students ride the bus safely. The principals will tell you that they communicate often with transportation around potential issues. The maintenance side of this is hands-on, yes, but not to the same degree, and much more of a management of contractors and long-range planning of those things. And I will tell you that the day-to-day management will take over the long-range planning every day, because those things that happen within transportation have to be dealt with. It's no different than the principal who's dealing with, trying to support and help students. They will get pulled away from their long-term planning work and their supervision work because students always come first. And I think that is a piece of what I hope by splitting this position we will be able to move forward in. So this is not much more of an increase beyond $33,000, Part of that is the transportation supervisor position is currently open, and the plan is to eliminate that position. With a full-time director, that we don't see a need for that position. So some of the salary for that will go to that. So those are really the only two brand new, haven't done them, they're not keeping certain programs afloat. So we have some revenue. I'm going to review the ED 279 with folks one more time because I did do this with the board, but I think it's important to repeat it as often as possible because so much of our budget is dependent on what the state provides for subsidy. It is a huge, significant portion of that. So I've noted up our ED 279. This, again, will be available on the website, but I just want to point out a couple of things. So this is a super complex formula. And Gabby and I spent a lot of time learning this and making sure that what we are looking at is correct. So the good news is, because the fundamental thing they start with is how many kids do you have? Yeah, and everybody has that in the revenue part of their board book. So it starts with how many kids you have, because that is how we determine how much money you're going to get. So we are up from previous years, so that's good. The state also has increased the amount they're giving per pupil. So this number is like for everybody. And they've done that for lots of good reasons. The minimum salary for teachers is now $40,000. Health insurance, they hadn't accounted for increases in health insurance for years in this formula. So they made a lot of positive changes that all of us are supporting. Here's sort of like why we've missed out on those positive changes. Because also, the great change of providing free lunch to everybody has resulted in a depression in the number of students and families who've completed the free and reduced lunch form. That is the primary way in which we determine our economically disadvantaged. The funding formula provides you extra money for every student who is economically disadvantaged. And so by having fewer students there, that extra money is lost to us. So it's a potential, we lost out on $359,000 in subsidy. So it's not like they took it away from us. We just don't have those students anymore. We don't have those numbers anymore, so it just didn't come our way. Then the mill rate, the town's valuation is up $68.9 million. The state increased the mill rate from 7.1 to 7.29. So our required local contribution right out of the gate before anything else is increased $709,000. So that is required. The state will not give us their portion of the subsidy until our locals pay that amount. And that does not account for the additional money that we will need to spend because EPS does not fully fund schools. So, on the last page, we have this really awesome rosy number, and it looks like we're getting $600,000 more dollars, but it's really just on the backs of the local share. Like that number, this final number, $24,706,000, because $844,000 of that is the local share, it's not as rosy as it looks. So this is, and so the state share has shifted 2.12% has shifted to the local through this EPS, through this funding cycle. So this is a really important thing to keep in mind. This is not, again, I want to say this as many times as possible. That number is required. We cannot ask less than that if we want to receive our $16 million in subsidy. We will need to request more than that, and that is a consistent thing all school budgets do. They go above what EPS suggests because it's just not, EPS is not really, doesn't fully fund a school. Okay, so I'm going to invite Gabby up here to talk through the revenue side of this budget.
Oh, that's nice and tiny.
I know, you might have to go over there or something, I don't know. I can make it bigger. I think you can still see it all. You can touch it if you want, do what you want.
Okay. So I'm just going to briefly walk through the revenue sheet here and help you understand what we're looking at and what we're anticipating. This on the right side of the screen is what fiscal year 23 was budgeted for in revenue. And then on the left side of the screen is what we're expecting and budgeting for fiscal year 24. For the interest earned, you'll see an increase of $5,000. The Androscoggin interest rate that we are receiving just went up from 0.45% to 0.85%, so that's a significant increase for us, and that's reflected here. State agency, client tuition. This is funding or money that comes to us based on, I wrote it down so that I didn't screw this up. Any students that are in care or custody of the Department of Health and Human Services are placed by the Department of Health and Human Services with another person who is not the child's parent or legal guardian, or they could also be students attending the school while a resident of a state-operated institution. We receive payment of state agency client costs, which include special education costs and supportive services, including transportation. So any expense that we incur, we get back from the state. This estimate is based on a 3-year average. It fluctuates. We don't know exactly what we're going to get, but this is what we're budgeting for. Miscellaneous revenue, we're keeping the same. It can include things such as a workers' compensation rebate or unclaimed funds coming back to us. It's just miscellaneous money. We don't know what to expect. We keep it at $1,000. For the carryover funds from prior year, this is money that's considered unallocated fund balance. This current fiscal year, we carried forward $555,000. We're keeping that for next fiscal year, but we're increasing it for a couple of reasons. First, we're moving one-to-one devices from being funded by a grant over to the general fund. So we're moving over $101,950 increased in this line. In addition, we're anticipating being able to replace cafeteria tables at TRIP and also Leeds for $44,000. So we increased this amount as well. And then, for my purposes, the business office will be underspent for their budget for this fiscal year. So I am requesting that we carry forward $3,600 to cover additional training for me with Deb Roberts so that I can continue to understand all the finances of the district, which are really kind of complex. The state subsidy, this amount is taken directly from the 8279, which Carrie just went over. That's the amount that we will receive from the state as long as, as long as we have the local contribution of $8,444,493. In addition to that local contribution, there is the local-only debt service. While the district has a number of other loans outstanding, which include a number of different things, this particular amount is related specifically to the Green and Trip renovations and additions and Leeds and Turner parking improvements. This loan will be paid off in fiscal year 25. So we'll see an amount dedicated here for this current fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25, and then that'll go away unless, of course, we do some other great renovation. The local additional funds are the funds above the essential programs and services amount that's outlined in the ED 279, so the $8,444,000 that we are going to need to be able to continue to offer our students educational excellence, right? Everything that we need to give and offer our students. Finally, if you scroll down a little bit more, there is the adult education local assessment. This is not outlined here, but we're maintaining the $176,460 in the revenue request from the locals to have our adult education program run smoothly and with the staffing needs required.
So the total increase to local, do you want to?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So that's the budget increase from last year is the $2,555,787 that Carrie had discussed. And then with the mill rate increase and also the valuation increase, this is going to shift, unfortunately, a 19.01% to the locals, which is $2,527,833. So it's a large sum of money. And we're going to outline what it is that's making up that budget.
So just one other thing that I'll mention, that we, part of what we've been working on is trying to think about how we can support this budget while also reducing it to be responsible. And Teresa and Cassandra, her assistant, have been working on rewriting the ESSER 3 grant there was a number of projects in that grant that we weren't able to complete. Social workers that we weren't able to hire, other things. Teresa's got more information on that. So over February vacation, they completed a complete rewrite of ESSER 3, and it was submitted. We were told that it was going to take 3 to 4 weeks, so we thought maybe, by the end of March we would have that information. Yesterday, late in the afternoon, we got word that it was approved. So there are things in this, awesome work for Teresa and Cassandra. So not all of what's in there is in this budget, but there is a significant amount of money that we will be able to come back to you next week with a reduction and tell you exactly what we've pulled out to be paid for in grants. There's also a number of great projects we're going to be able to do that were not in the budget. Certainly they were requests, but didn't get put in. So we'll outline that next week. There was not enough time, in addition to us really nailing down all of our amounts and making sure that we have it correct between yesterday afternoon. Yesterday we just spent the day going like, are they punking us? Did it really get approved? So we just had to do a lot of like, are you sure it's approved? So we know it's approved. So next week we'll have our first revised budget for you, and we'll go through, certainly we'll just highlight and then every time come back to the revenue sheet so you can see the impact on locals, because that's really the most important piece, is to make sure that we understand what that impact is. So the last thing I'd like to show you before we talk about, before we hear from principals around their executive summaries, is I do just want to share the information that's available on the district website. So when you go to the website, if you are on a phone, there's a menu that shows up at the bottom, and there's that either shows you that, or up here at the top if you're on a computer, there's a budget information tag. And then what we have in there today is all the stuff that we have in the budget book right now is available here on the website. The presentation that I did today will be available as soon as I can download it, turn it into PDF, get Jason to post it. And then, as Betsy mentioned, there is a link here in terms of submitting a question. Certainly people can just email me, right? Like I send out family emails all the time. If you're a community member, you may not know my email address, but on this budget information sheet is a place to submit a question. Those questions will come to me. If I don't know the answer, send it to Gabby, send it to Teresa, send it to one of the principals, whoever has that information. So we're hoping to make sure that people feel like the information they're getting is accurate, timely, up to date, so that they're feeling like it's an informed process. So I just wanted to draw people's attention to that so that they understood. Also, Jason Breton has done a great job of putting in all the dates of all of our meetings and what's going to be discussed at each meeting. So if people want to make sure that they know what's going to be on the agenda, they can refer to that there. Okay, so before I turn it over to principals and directors to talk about executive summaries, are there any questions for me? Yes. Was there a question? No? Oh, I think we're going to have public comment, or do
We'll
you
do
want
public comment specific to the budget. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
That way we make sure everybody has an opportunity. Do you have something that?
I had a question about what you said before Ms. Ned spoke. I did not hear what you said about public comment. If you could repeat that, please.
Yep. So you'll notice that beginning in our agenda this evening, there'll be 2 opportunities for public comment. In tonight's agenda, we see 2.1.3, and that's public comment on the budget. So that's the anticipation is that's specific to budget items. You'll also continue to see our freestanding agenda item, public comment. For tonight's agenda, that's number 4. So
Where is the agenda?
There was some extra ones on the table as you came in.
On the table.
Jamie. Oh, Betsy, do you want it? Sorry.
Jamie.
Sorry. So, in terms of the free lunch and losing funding, because at our last meeting, you mentioned that you had talked to other superintendents in the state, and pretty much everyone is in the same position.
Everyone that has a significant enough population of economic needs, right? Yeah. Green's
So,
not feeling the pain.
Is there any buzz about, with the state perhaps fixing that problem?
So the issue is not with the state, the issue is with the federal guidelines around free and reduced lunch. So what the state is trying to do, and I got an update from Dan Chuda, who's the assistant DOE chair. I don't remember the name of his title. But I know they are working with the federal government to try to find other acceptable ways to measure that population, because like, there are ways to know how many people are in poverty in communities that we know but aren't used for this particular purpose. So far, they have not been successful. I think I've said this before. We are not the only state who's continued the free lunch. We are not the only state struggling with this issue. It has not been resolved. I really don't, honestly don't expect it to be resolved within this process. I don't. That would be, I mean, at some point, they'd have to shift the money, like, they've got a pot of money for schools, so then it would be the shift between schools, so then people would not be able to count on an amount that they would be able to use for their budget.
The CME increasing, when's that?
October, our current contract expires, so November, a new rate will go into effect. And I have been meeting with different companies to determine what the rates could be.
So we're trying to anticipate that, right? It's not going to change until October for us. Fortunately, we're under contract until October at a reasonable rate, but we're trying to make a prediction.
Move on to, was there a question?
Do you want to do that now in public comment?
Yeah, let's leave that for public comment, please,
No, it's
because
not.
there is an opportunity for public comment.
But it's just a question about the produced lunch.
Will people be able to ask questions during
Okay,
public comment?
I can wait.
Yes, yeah, I think public comment.
Okay.
Yeah, so yes, you'll be able to ask a question. I think that was it, like, can they ask questions during that? Yep.
Yes, that's the intent of the addition.
All right, so, I think my part's done. So the executive summaries, I'm going to ask principals and directors to just give you some highlights and things to pay attention to. So we'll start with regular instruction and the principals. I think Doug is going to speak for the elementary principals, and then Jana and Evan.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have me represent the elementary school principals, and we'll share this brief executive summary with you. We do want to point out to the board that we try to be as creative as we can in order to mitigate costs. And to that end, Turner Primary School, as Superintendent Med mentioned, requested an additional grade 1 teacher. That, however, is being filled by an existing position that was moved from GCS. That request also included a television, which is actually being paid for by grant funds. There is a request at TPS for $500 for curriculum needs and supplies. And Turner Elementary School had requested a full-time assistant principal to help with student behavioral interventions, but that was removed due to budget constraints. Onward, the elementary school software requests are consistent with what they've been in previous years, including Reading A to Z+, eSpark, IXL, and Zern and Lexia. This money is coming from per pupil allocations, so that will not be an increase to the budget, but rather a cut in the money that we have available to purchase classroom supplies. Many of these software subscriptions had previously been paid for also with grant funds. A notable new request in the collective elementary school budget, as Superintendent Med mentioned, is funding to purchase one-to-one technology devices for our kindergarten and grade 3 students. This is part of our technology replacement cycle as our current devices reach their end of life. The total is approximately $100,000, broken out among all 4 of our elementary schools. The previous source of the funding was grants. Technology has, of course, become an essential component of classroom instruction, and regular replacement of these devices will ensure that our students have what they need as 21st century learners. Thanks for your consideration.
Hi, good evening. Tripp Middle School has put in the addition of a science/social studies teacher due to the increase of an expected 25 to 30 students. Just to sort of break down how the middle school works, we're based on by content. Teachers teach by content. And so when students come up and they have 25% of our population receives specially designed instruction due to special ed. And so Math, for example, students could go to gen ed math. We have some advanced math, but then we also have 25% of our population that go to specially designed instruction or resource room for math, also for literacy. We don't have that for science and social studies, so all students attend gen ed science and social studies, making those classes already significantly larger than math and literacy. UA, our unified arts classes, are also larger, but just by nature of the content and the size of the classrooms, it's not as much of an issue. So right now, an average math or literacy class would be about 18 students, whereas our science and social studies classes are 23, 24 students. So with the projected increase, we're looking at like 26. So we don't have enough desks. Even if we got more desks, the classroom sizes themselves are not large enough. And then specifically with science, to do any sort of lab work or hands-on, and there's not a lot of science at the elementary level, just because of how the schedule works. And so science, like lab-based science, is really the first experience at the middle school that they get. We'd have to be a little bit creative with the certification, but the middle school falls under that umbrella of like a K-8 certification. So you could get someone that has a general ed certification and would be able to teach science and social studies. And so for next year, we'd be looking at them specifically addressing the 7th graders. And we have an A-B schedule, so they could do like 7th grade science on one day and social studies on the other day. I'd bring it to the leadership team if it moved through to sort of see how it would work best, but it would reduce the class sizes pretty much to where they are now. Questions?
Good evening, everybody. The proposed 9 to 12 budget in regular instruction does include, or continues to include, Chromebooks for our incoming 9th graders. We've had that in there for several years now. There is an increase to that particular line because they cost more than they have in the past. There's a couple of places where you're also going to notice, you're going to be wondering what I'm doing because it looks like there's massive increases. And there are 2 of those spots. And one of those is in art, equipment, and software. That looks like it's a substantial increase. Those funds were requested last year, but they were inadvertently left out of the final approved budget, so this looks like a total increase when in fact this is not new. This is something we've had before. I'm just trying to get the number back to where it should be. The second place that you will notice that is in the alternative education line. That looks like a brand new $9,000 request. That is not a brand new request. That's another one that was inadvertently left out through the process last year. Those funds are used primarily to support 2 students per year to enroll in the Region 9 commercial truck driving program up in Mexico. And there is also funds in that line for students if we need to enroll them in an online class or a course somewhere that weren't able to get them in at school. So although that looks brand new, it's not. It's one we've had for a while. You will also notice an increase in contracted services, that increase of $5,500. That reflects our share or a portion of our share of our Jobs for Maine grad teacher, JMG teacher. We are working with the JMG statewide program and progressively getting up to our full share, which is $27,000, which we'll get to in 25-26. So this year's contribution is up $5,500 from last year. And as Ms. Med pointed out, the proposed budget reflects a reduction of 2 teaching positions at the high school. I'm working closely with Mrs. Poulin in the guidance office as she enters course requests to figure out, trying to get some data to see where we will be able to absorb those. So more information to come on that as we sort through all that information as it comes in.
Good evening. I'm Rebecca Drysdale. I'm the Director of Special Education, and I'm here this evening to talk about the special education budget, which has one of the increases, large increases, that we have for the district. As I've been telling the board, as the year has progressed, we have a significant number of the number of our students is increasing significantly. We are now really looking at, we have 390 students who have IEPs, and we have 30 students in the referral process, which means they meet with a team, they're evaluated, and determine if they meet the criteria. So we could potentially be looking at starting a year, if we don't have any more referrals for the rest of this year, with 420 students, which is significant. It's an increase of 70 students receiving IEP services. Special education budget has lots of moving parts. We function between the general budget, and we also have a supplemental grant that's only used to supplement the budget. It's not used, we cannot supplant the budget. So we can't supplant teachers and some of the services that students receive. But we do use that. We are looking to use that, as Carrie had pointed out, to be able to support potential secretaries for our teachers, to be able to retain highly qualified teachers. So what we have done in that process is looking at where we can shift our resources between what we have in the grant and then the general budget. So what we have done is we have looked at potentially eliminating 2 EdTech 1 positions that are currently unfilled. We are looking at eliminating 1 EdTech 1 position, and that has a current person in it working towards an EdTech 2. So we are going to add an EdTech 2 into the budget for that school to maintain that position and that person. We're also looking to move the assistant director, who has 39 days in the local entitlement grant, into the general budget as well, to be able to support potentially up to 3 secretaries for our special education staff to be able to support with paperwork. Let me get to my... To address the increased number of students, we've identified, actually, Carrie and I we've all gone back and forth between the number of ed techs. We've met with the schools. Certainly, we've examined our student needs. We had looked at 6 ed techs, but with the addition of removing a 7th ed tech from local entitlement that's currently vacant, we had changed that number from 6 to 7. However, due to what we have for looking at our budget that Carrie had gone over, we were looking to have 3 of those positions out of the 7 added to the general budget. We were also looking at not only adding the assistant director in, but we were looking at additional days for the assistant director to be work during the summer, because we have students coming into us, 4-year-olds going into, we have between their 4 and 5 coming into our kindergarten classrooms, and they have meetings throughout the summer and are being identified throughout the summer, and then they're with us in September. So we need to be able to continue to support our students that way. And we also have the addition of, as Carrie had pointed out, we have the addition of the special education teacher at Turner Elementary School to look at, or Turner Primary School, sorry, to look at those increased needs. I have, because there's so many moving parts, as part of this, I've also developed a companion document for you to look at the moving parts with that. One of the pieces where we're looking at efficiencies for special education is we were also able to move a vacant position at Green Central School in our behavior support program, which we have not been able to fill, to the high school to be able to do that. And then we've also been able to utilize an EdTech 2 position that was vacant in that same behavior program for resource at Green. So we always try to see what we have available to us between the general budget and the grant, and being able to support our staff the best way that we can. Are there any questions?
And that supplemental document is in there.
It is. Yeah, it's right after the executive summary.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Warrant Article 4 is other instruction. and that includes co-curricular activities and athletics. The co-curricular portion of the high school budget, you're going to notice a reduction in co-curricular equipment. That line is where we had budgeted funds for year one of our lighting upgrade in the auditorium. Those funds have been moved and are reflected in minor capital repairs, but I'm guessing you're going to hear more about that next week. I think that falls under one of the things that we might talk about next week. Anyway, the athletic portion of the warrant article 4 for the high school includes the addition of a stipend for a unified bocce coach. This would allow for us to have 2 seasons for our unified sports students. This is a request that's been in the budget for a couple of years but hasn't made it through. There's also funding for a new set of soccer goals that haven't made it through the last couple of rounds. You're going to see those in athletics equipment. The biggest increase that you'll see will be in athletic supplies. These funds are to purchase uniforms for our athletic teams. We currently do not budget any funds to purchase uniforms for our teams. Those uniforms are all purchased through the fundraising efforts of the booster organizations. And Mr. LaRoche will, if these funds are included, will use these funds to create a schedule so that one team per season is able to purchase a new set of uniforms and rotate that through on an annual basis. That will likely not fully fund the purchase of a full set of uniforms. Uniforms are remarkably expensive, but it will, however, substantially reduce the amount we're asking our booster organizations to provide. Also included in other instruction is summer school, and we're maintaining our current request for summer school.
And for the middle school part of this warrant article, the 2 big purchases would be replacing the field hockey goals. The most reasonable bid we saw was just shy of $5,000, and that's part of like a regular rotation that happens. In addition, there's a little bit more wear and tear. The field hockey field is at Turner Primary, and the goals are left outside throughout the year, and so going to be working with facilities to find a way to get those stored inside to potentially increase the longevity. And similar to what Eben was sharing at the middle school, we purchase uniforms, and those are on like a rotation every couple of years, but not for the football uniforms, which I didn't realize, and that's because I guess previously the students would get their names put on the back so they could keep them, but we're going to change that practice. So we would need to purchase jerseys, football uniforms that would then become trip property and be part of the cycle that's replaced every couple of years. But those are pretty pricey, even the most reasonable being about $6,600 for uniforms. You can ask questions. I don't know if I'll have the answer, but our athletic director is going to come when we go into more detail on these.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point, that when we go through, have the opportunity in each of the warrant articles, we'll have line-by-line numbers for all of these. We'll also have these additional opportunities for folks to send in specific questions ahead of time so that our directors and folks can have those answers as well. Jamie?
So in the past, this football players have purchased their own uniforms because their names have been on the back? Okay.
So Teresa and Wally have student and staff report.
Good evening. We didn't practice.
I can actually take my computer away now that everybody's like, that would actually be helpful for you guys, I think.
I don't need it up here anymore. Good job.
Should have thought about that.
That's okay. All right, good evening. As Ms. Med referenced, the addition of a school resource officer with an approximated cost of $114,000 shows up in this warrant article. Additional increases are included because of student safety monitoring. That will show up in the district software line. An increase due to the purchase of a Google Workspace backup, which I don't know what it means, but it's important. And then for some of the iPads that will be in place at Tripp Middle School, we want to purchase some Apple Pencils. We need to purchase JAMP licenses. That's always required for iPads. And then some additional software to support student interest. Also, this part of the budget includes 5 staff machines in the district-wide computer hardware. And there is a slight decrease in the funding that's allocated for substitute nurses. That's because it's moved to another area. So we're trying to make things more streamlined. So this does reflect, this warrant article does reflect an increase of 8.7%.
Does Wally want to say what the safety one is?
Sure, I bet you
Yeah, I
would.
mean, the
Yeah.
proposal, when you get a chance to review the proposals in the book, it'll explain it. But basically, it's software that adds on to our Google Workspace to scan and monitor for threats, concerning language, stuff like that, for protecting students and being able to intervene when necessary. So it's a super brief. The proposal has some extra detail in there. Any questions?
I actually learned that we didn't have that, and I was surprised because I had always had that as a principal, so it was a conversation that Wally and I had about making sure that it was in there. I would get notices from the tech director if a student was Googling suicidal things so that we could intervene and call home and things like that, and I just feel like it's really essential to help keep kids safe, so that's why that's there. All right, so I'm going to talk about systems administration. It's up 2.9%. School board dues and fees are up 10%, $657. Those are what we pay to Maine School Management. The auditors want us to give them more money, so that's up $6,000. We increased the training fees for school board. We have overexpended that line the last couple of years, so it's at $1,500, but that pays for when board members want to go to the Maine School Management Conference, or if we do any kind of legal training that we have similar to what we've done this year. A change in health benefits, an increase in the training line, it's 29%, but it's $228. And that's just the training line that I use to go to conferences, attend Drummond and Woodsum, legal things like that. The supplies line is up $2,000, and that's reflective in the cost of supplies. And then finally, the training that Gabby mentioned that she's going to continue to engage in with the Maine School Management, Deb Roberts, that we have offset in what we're pulling over from the fund balance. So not significant changes there. Okay, who's next? Oh, okay, yeah, so, okay. Got it in a row. So school administration, that budget is only up 0.7%. And the major change here is that the Dean of Students position at the high school was an administrative position, and we have shifted that to a teacher position. So that's a savings of about $23,000. And the Dean of Students can still do a lot of the intervention work and behavior work that they do with students while on a teacher contract. In conversations with Evan, although Evan, you certainly can provide more detail when you do your presentation, that person with an administrative certificate was able to suspend students, for example, attend IEP meetings. That person won't be able to do the suspension piece and may be able to do IEP meetings. I think that's something we got to continue to talk about. So it will move into the teacher. So it will be reflected in his teacher lines, that increased position, but it is a movement and a reduction in the amount of money out of administration into teacher. I think they will also have additional, 10 days of work on either end of the school year in terms of preparing for the school year and wrapping things up. Other than that, it's not a significant, no other significant changes other than salaries and health insurance. Okay. All right. So
So I'm going to be with you for a few warrant articles. First, we're going to talk about warrant Article 8, Transportation. Carrie mentioned earlier that we're proposing to split the Transportation Facilities Director position. This position will, for the Transportation Director, it will replace the Transportation Supervisor position and increase the salary. We're also proposing to purchase 2 new buses, which is consistent with what we've been doing over the last few years to ensure the safety of the transport of all of our students. You will see an increase in hours for overtime, substitute, and out-of-district salaries. However, a decrease in the regular bus driver lines. This is in line with actual expenses that are incurred over the last few years. There's now a transportation software expense that you will see that is a new expense in the budget for fiscal year 24. However, it was also an expense incurred in fiscal year 23. It was just not budgeted for. There are now separate workers' compensation budget lines associated with most positions. So you'll see that across all of the warrant articles, but the most notable increase is going to be in the transportation warrant article because there's a higher workers' compensation rate associated with bus drivers than other positions. And then, of course, Carrie also mentioned the insurance costs. So you're going to see an insurance increase across the board for all of the schools, all of the property and liability, and of course the fleet insurance. You will note that in the budget book, it appears to be a 41% increase over last year or our current fiscal year's budget. That's not true. It's actually a 20% increase over our current fiscal year's actual expense. Unfortunately, the budgeted amount was not budgeted properly for the last 2 fiscal years. They forecasted the budget on the previous year's budgeted amount rather than the actual expense. So while it appears to be a 41% increase, it's a 20% increase over our actual expenses. That is warrant Article 8. Do you have any questions on that one? Okay. Warrant Article 9, Facilities. In addition to proposing the split of the Transportation and Facilities Director position, we are proposing to increase the Facilities Director salary so that it's more in line with neighboring community salary ranges. We're proposing the upgrade of a Maintenance Worker 1 position to a Maintenance Worker 2 position. This will allow this individual to take on additional duties and reduce costs to subcontractors or other outside sources to take care of aerating the fields and maintaining the sprinkler systems. Again, I discussed it just before, the increase to property insurance district-wide, which what we budgeted for may not actually be accurate based on information we received this afternoon from our insurance provider. We're expecting a significant increase in electricity costs. We discussed that our current contract is set to end in October. I have been working with a couple of different companies. Our contract right now is with Constellation Energy. I've met with 2 other companies to see what their rates would be. I have a meeting set for the end of this month to determine if it's a good time to lock in a rate for October, for a year, maybe 2 years. We'll see what they have to say, and I'll discuss that with the Finance Committee. Our continued maintenance agreements for mechanical ventilation and boiler service, energy management and pneumatic controls, and also automation controls increase annually. This is reflected in our budget as well. We're proposing a number of needed renovations and repairs at the high school, and we've also budgeted for the increase of cost of goods on cleaning supplies, paper products, and other janitorial and maintenance items. Any questions on facilities?
Yeah,
8 is
prior one talked about the splitting of transportation and facilities. And so when you say an increase for the facilities director's salary, are you talking about the current position as it stands now?
So, no, it's still going to be the split. So right now we have a transportation/facilities director. We want to split the position. The transportation supervisor position will no longer exist, and it will be the transportation director. But with the facilities director position, we're proposing an increase because all of the neighboring districts has significantly higher salaries than what we presently pay.
So I guess my question is the current salary for that position, it's now going to be just
Yes, that's correct.
facilities, but that's the increase. So we're decreasing what we're asking and we're increasing the salary. Is that, okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
I'm gonna go, yeah.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. The
Thank you.
transportation director's salary is not as high as that. When you look
Correct.
at neighboring,
Yeah.
it's a lower salary, but the maintenance for those folks who are doing that job alone. I looked at a lot of neighboring schools that have a combo. You have to go below to see if that's actually what is happening, because oftentimes there's fewer buildings, there's not a wastewater treatment plant, there's a lot of other things that we're asking that person to do that other districts who have a combo position aren't doing. And there's additional more people below that also supporting that position. So the goal is hiring people, paying them so that they'll stay, and keeping some consistency with both of those departments. And that is why we're asking for those salary changes.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Other questions on facilities?
Okay, I'm gonna stay here. Warrant Article 10, debt service. So I briefly mentioned that there are other loans, some of which include a Siemens Energy Performance Contract, a Siemens Phase 2 project, which included a chiller replacement, a wood chip bunker installation at Levitt, a ventilator replacement and gym and cafe ventilation upgrade at Turner Elementary, and kitchen equipment replacement at Tripp. There's also an athletic field renovation loan, and then leases on district school buses and other maintenance vehicles. But the only expense that's actually considered a debt service is the Green and Tripp renovations and additions and Leeds and Turner parking improvements bond, which started in 2004, which will be paid off in fiscal year 25. You'll see a decrease in the annual amount based on the interest. The interest is reduced by $9,500. Any questions on debt service? Okay, one more. Warrant Article 11, other expenditures. So this warrant article is used to help offset expenses related to both food service and adult education. Due to the change in how student lunches and breakfasts are funded, food service is not in need of any funding outside of the revenue that they receive from state and federal sources. However, you'll see an increase in the proposed budget for the 16 to 20-year-old line, which is to support the adult education program. Several years ago, prior to fiscal year 21 and 22, not the full amount was needed as what was budgeted. We budgeted roughly $63,000, and only in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $35,000 was transferred. But for fiscal year 21 and 22, the full amount was needed. So I'm not sure why there was a reduction so significantly to $39,987. So we are proposing to bring it back up to $63,880. I also want to note that the last page, or even in that warrant article, for other expenditures, you're going to see the 2 years prior actual shows $177,000 as the expense. That is actually fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22's transfer done in fiscal year 22, because no one did the transfer in fiscal year 21, and that was causing over a $65,000 deficit showing in adult education. So I did that retroactively for fiscal year 22 per the guidance of the auditors. That was a lot of information, sorry. Any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to sit for a few minutes. You'll see me in a minute.
Hello, I'm David Roberts, Food Service Director. Warrant Article 14 is food service. I want to talk a little bit first of all about how the budget is managed in food service. It's a bit different than some of the other departments. As an enterprise, we have distinct revenue sources to include per meal reimbursements from state and federal sources, a la carte sales, catering sales. You won't see those revenue sources in the general budget. They never hit the general fund. At the same time, our expenses also don't come from the general fund. They're paid for by food service revenues. So the only time food service budget has an impact on the general fund is if we're projecting a year where expenses will outpace revenues and will need a local subsidy. We haven't asked for one in the last few years, so we're expecting a zero impact to the general fund this year as well. So when you look at the first bullet point there in Article 14, it says we have a 21% increase in our projected expenses. And as I mentioned before, our increased revenues will pay for that, so there'll be no impact to the general fund on that. A couple of points here, because we know that we had federal funding through the pandemic that paid for all the students' meals. The state of Maine, as has been mentioned already, decided to continue that funding. Perhaps forever, we don't know. It seems like there's bipartisan support for that legislation, although it doesn't come, it's not really free, it does have an impact. One of the challenges that we have is historically in our district, we've had about a third of our students qualify for free and reduced meals, which makes them economically disadvantaged. Because of the fact that there's not as much incentive to fill the form out now, we're down to about 25%. So the state saw that coming, and it does have a local impact on us. We did a real big push for applications this fall to get as many as we could. The good news is that that's our floor right now, 25% roughly. We're not going to go below that the next 3 years. We're locked into a Provision 2 scenario. We hope that that number goes up as they explore other means to identify that population of students. So given that, in the past, we've had about a third of our meals paid for by federal government, and the other 2/3 is paid for by families. So now, the federal government is only paying for 25% of those meals, and the state is picking up about 75%. So you can see why that's a little bit of a challenge with the funding model. We hope that will rectify itself going forward. As you can imagine, with parents not having to pay for the meals, we're seeing an increase in meals served across the district. We presented earlier this year, and we're at about 35% more breakfasts on a daily basis, 20% more lunches on a daily basis. We hope that that will continue, given that the support for this program is pretty widespread. So as you can imagine, serving that many more kids results in higher expenses. So when you look at the line-by-line budget that's at the back of this folder, you'll see significant increases in food costs, salary costs, equipment costs, but once again, those are being covered by additional revenues. Labor increases, we've increased staffing, as you can well imagine. We're looking to change some job classifications to reflect the additional work and responsibilities that those folks are handling at those schools. We've accelerated equipment upgrades. We've improved service models. The good news is we've established a cash balance reserve of about 3 to 4 months worth of expenses, which is in line with what UCA recommends, and that's kind of a new thing for us, because in the past we kind of always operated with a zero cash on hand and made it work, but it's nice to have a subsidy or fund available for when things come up, so that's good. So the increases in salaries, of course, increased staffing, increased incremental salaries related to collective bargaining, an increase in substitute labor. That's a 3-year average, but we're seeing more use with substitutes across the district with more positions to fill. Under equipment repairs and purchases, we set aside money for repairs. You can't always predict what you're going to need, so there's contingency funds in there. There are some proposals here. There's one that I mentioned already, upgrading 3 positions in 3 different schools from an assistant to a specialist, which reflects what they're doing skill-wise. There's 3 pieces of equipment, 2 for the Levitt High School, 1 for Green. You can see that detail. I won't read it to you right now. And of course, we're looking at increased food cost, mostly because of increased meals served, but also because of inflation. You see it at the grocery store. And we have supply chain issues. A lot of times what's happening with us is we have products on our bid that aren't available, so when we buy those products out of necessity off bid, we're paying a higher price. So there's some challenges there. But again, the last point here, all expenses are projected to be covered by department revenues and or supported by cash balance reserves. No request for local subsidy required. for 23-24, which is the same thing we've done the last 2 years. So, questions about that? Thank you. Feels like a long walk. I'm Brian Breach, the Director of Adult Education. Excuse me. And as you can see here, our budget remains about the same as last year, approximately a 1% decrease. No tax dollars are used to support our enrichment programs. We function with 2 programs, our diploma programs as well as our enrichment programs. The students in our diploma and high school equivalency programs have increased dramatically this year. As of January, we had reached what is our typical historical yearly average, and we still have a few months to go. We've made some changes in order to try to reflect the changes in the world today. One of our full-time teaching positions was converted to a STEAM coordinator in order to enhance our technological and science programs so that we're educating students properly for the jobs that are going to be available. We also partnered with our Hub 6 partners, Lewiston, Auburn, Mechanic Falls in Poland, Lisbon, Oxford Hills, Sacapee Valley, and we are offering an applied workforce technology program. This will give students an IC3 certification as well as Microsoft Office certification and State of Maine Work Ready certification. And finally, we have partnered with the state and the Maine Jobs and Recovery Program to bring on board a college and career success coordinator that will act as a liaison between adult education in the area and the local community college in an effort to ensure that our students have greater options for success as they explore post-secondary education, whether that's a community college or any certificate and degree programs in the area. Any questions? Thank you.
Last time, I promise. Finally is warrant article 19, local additional funds for capital reserve. So what we can do for unallocated fund balance is carry forward amounts for specific reserve accounts. While we don't have a definitive number on our unallocated fund balance at this time because our fiscal year 22 audit is still going on, we hope to have the number by the end of March, fingers crossed, to be done with that process. We can comfortably say that it would be in the district's best thoughts. We can just say, put our best foot forward to establish some reserve accounts for future expenses that we know will come, we just don't know exactly when. So one thing that we would like to do is establish a technology reserve fund. This fund would be able to be used for expenses such as the replacement of servers, or the phone system, or other district computers not related to one-to-one devices for the students. We know that these expenses are going to come. Servers die. Phone systems need to be upgraded. Wally is looking into how we can effectively do that, the phone system specifically, but we don't know what the timeline is just yet. We have a lot of different kinks to work out. So we would like to establish this reserve account, and we would also like to move $100,000 from our unallocated fund balance into this reserve account. In addition to that, we would like to move $200,000 from the unallocated fund balance into an already established capital repair reserve fund. This, again, could be used on a number of different things, but specifically the maintenance of plant and minor remodeling projects as needed. We know that there's going to be things coming up. We know that we're working on a wastewater treatment plant. We have a loan for that. We are also meeting with the DEP to establish other funding. We know that our diesel tank will need to be replaced. We know that different things throughout the district need to be upgraded and replaced. So this will help to establish a fund so that it will offset the expenses and not directly go to the taxpayer or the budget. Any questions on that? Thank you.
So that concludes all of the executive summaries. Board members, you do have these documents printed, included with your budget books, so you'll have the opportunity to review those at your leisure before you get into consideration of each of the individual warrant articles as we move through things. Our next agenda item is public comment on the budget. The same rules will apply to this public comment session as do any of our public comments, so I'll read through those so everybody's refreshed on those. Citizens and employees of the school unit are welcome to participate as provided in this policy. Others may be recognized to speak at the chair's discretion. Individual employees and/or employee groups will not be permitted to discuss matters for which complaint or grievance procedures are provided. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic as well as the time each individual may speak, and this will be 3 minutes on this one as well. In the event of a sizable audience, the chair may require persons interested in speaking to sign up so they may be called upon in a fair and efficient manner. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they begin talking. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. All speakers are to address the chair and direct questions or comments to particular board members of the superintendent only with approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. Members of the board and the superintendent may ask questions of any person who addresses the board, but are expected to refrain from arguing or debating issues. Questions must be addressed through the chair. No complaints or allegations will be allowed at board meetings concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. Personal matters or complaints concerning student or staff issues will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments to the board. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. Persons who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave, and the chair may request law enforcement assistance as necessary to restore order. Do we have folks that would like to participate in this public comment as it pertains to specific to the budget?
Hello, Jimmy Childs. How much money or is any in the budget for the lead issues in the schools?
Right now, we're working on replacing water fountains themselves, and so those are just within our regular maintenance budget. Yes, okay.
The increase to our property values, a lot of us' pays checks haven't really gone up. You know, so I mean, yeah, property might be worth more. We ain't making more money. And I realize we got to spend it to keep the schools running. I'm all for the resource officer. I thank you for that. Fought hard for that last year. I hope it goes through, and I'll pay more money to get it.
You have that on camera? You have that recorded, Jenny.
Besides my property tax, the school gets like $32,000 for my kids, which makes me an important role in this, and I just hope that my words are heard and my questions and concerns get answered, you know, in a timely manner. I think I deserve that. And the student safety monitoring concerning language and content, is there any way to elaborate a little bit on that?
I'll start, and then I'll also offer this experience I had with the school.
Refer to the exact proposal as the main.
And that may be something that can be included in that warrant article as well. The discussion around that. I mean, I think that would,
Yes.
your 3 minutes worth of comment.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll spend time describing that when we talk about that warrant. It's the other student staff support, right? So when Teresa and Wally do that one, we'll go into that in more detail.
Probably similar to like the internet policy thing where they don't really want you to look at certain things prohibited, maybe a little.
It's more about the communication that happens within, and if students are participating in searches that are worrisome, right?
Yeah.
So a student starts to search for suicide things or something, there would be a flag that would just allow adults to intervene.
Good idea.
Yeah, okay.
And that's definitely something we did talk in more detail about when we're on that warrant article.
So I'm Crystal Nicholas from Green. I just have two questions about the budget. One was about the free and reduced lunch. So from what I understand, the state needs us to fill out forms for that. Wouldn't that be information the state already has through taxes? So I'm wondering what they're asking on these forms. Is this, data mining? What do they need?
So the forms have been in existence forever. The schools have been collecting these forms forever. That just it establishes the amount of money that a family makes and whether or not they qualify for the free and reduced lunch because of low income. It's just salary, right? And how many people are in your household.
Yes.
So it's just salary and number of people in your household, and if the numbers line up, then you are eligible for free and reduced lunch. That's how the way it used to work. Now everyone is eligible, so we still need the forms because that directly impacts our funding, but people don't need the form to get their free lunch.
But wouldn't the government already have it?
Yes. Yes, but the rules do not allow for those that cross, the rules don't allow for that.
Okay. And my other question real quickly was about the increase of 70 students to the special ed, and Ms. Drysdale was very kind several meetings back. She stayed to speak with me about that. And I think, I can't quite recall, and I think she did talk about this, are more students constantly being identified for this? I think that you did mention that. But is there a higher percentage incoming? Because you talked about more students coming in this year, that your number of students is going up. So are more of them new students coming in, or are more of them just being collected through higher standards, kind of like the lead standards went up? So are we just seeing more of them? If you can speak to that.
Yeah, so students are referred per the policy. They can be referred by a parent, they can be referred by a class or teacher, really someone that has general knowledge of the student and their school performance. And so we have seen, in the amount of referrals, we have seen a drastic increase over referrals we've had in previous years. And we have had an increase of students moving into the district throughout the school year in that process as well. So there's something going on. That could be a whole other study. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, so Crystal asked a really good question. I want to make sure it gets answered. So she asked if there had been any changes in the qualifications for students in special ed?
There have not.
And there has not. Okay,
No,
thank you.
The standards have not changed.
Okay,
The
thank you.
criteria has not changed.
Thank you, Jessica.
Other folks?
Hello, my name's Jen. I just had a couple questions about, I'm sorry, Bernier.
Thank you.
I have a question about warrant article number 8. Do we need fuel on site? So I'm wondering, if we didn't have fuel on site, would it lower our liability insurance? Does the cost of savings from having it on site, is the savings higher than the cost of the liability insurance? I'm just curious why the liability insurance is going up 21%.
Okay, so I'm not sure if having a gas tank off-site or not having a gas tank on-site would lower that. What I can tell you is that we received communication from our insurance provider earlier today that they have received a number of issues, not just from us, actually minimal from us, but from all of their clients, that is causing them to have such an increase.
So is this claims?
This is claims, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So that's one of the reasons that our insurance is increasing so much. But in addition to that, having the gas tank on site allows us to get bids for lower fuel costs. So for instance, our current diesel fuel cost, I believe, don't quote me on this because I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's $3.30 per gallon on diesel fuel. If you go past a gas station, you'll see it's somebody help me, $5.60. $5.89 a gallon. So while we can get taxes back at the end of the year by filling out forms, it helps us in processes and save money up front and get lower costs because we know that we're going to use 45,000 gallons, so we can get lower rates.
And we actually don't have gasoline tanks on site, we only have diesel tanks. So we're paying retail for gasoline.
The plan is to have both on-site and
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think
would
we
like
do.
to.
Yeah, I mean, it would reduce our costs, but for right now, there's no specific plan.
Also, about the school lunch forms, is it federally mandated that we have to use that specific form?
Yes, the form is universal, like it's the same form used in all schools.
There is an alternative form that the Department of Ed in Maine has always been in existence. You can try and collect a couple more numbers through that, but the form is the same regardless of where you are. Yeah.
I think it's just, as a parent that doesn't qualify, in the years past, I didn't realize how important it was until my mom actually works for the school department. So I think a lot of parents know they don't qualify, and so they don't fill it out. And I have filled it out, and then you get the rejection letter like you don't qualify, so you feel like you're doing something wrong. So I think if we try to approach it different, maybe offer prizes to the school that gets the most.
Carrie Stewart principal up in Rumford, and they did that as well. So it could be, yeah. I mean, Dave and I spent a lot of time this summer sort of putting things out.
We were actually pleased with the number we got back. We were actually expecting less, but without question, we're going to continue to try and collect. Even though we can lock in our rate now, lock in the number now, it's not going to mean that we're not going to try to continue to collect that.
Well, I will say this, there are some districts, I'll use Lewiston as an example, they've had free lunch for many, many years now. They have an alternative form that they use to collect that data with because they don't need it for school lunch. They use that data for other departments and grant eligibility. So because of the provision too that we're in now, we're only required to collect applications in this base year. So for the next 3 years, we'll be looking for an alternative form.
Yeah.
And I think you make a good point, though. It does seem kind of punitive, the process, that you've done something wrong, but really we're just collecting data and you can't go wrong with just giving us data. And again, it's just income and it's strictly confidential at that point in time. And the point is, the government already knows how much money we make anyway.
And one more thing, if you don't mind, I'd like to propose that we leave the uniform expenses at the boosters. I am a booster myself, and it is a lot of work. It's a lot of footwork for the parents, but $16,000 is a lot of money that we could allocate elsewhere. You mentioned that we need field hockey nets and soccer nets. That money could cover that, and it could cover some sort of pole barn for the nets. So I think we should keep it on the boosters. Thank you.
We'll have the opportunity to discuss that when we get back on as well.
Hi, David Brackett from Leeds, if you want to know, you want to look me up. I'm really into budgets. I was the maintenance and transportation director for Winthrop for years, and also for Livermore Falls. And I, just real quick, and that's going to be hard because I got like 24 questions. I'm going to email you some of them. But I hear you talking about, you know you got some things you got to do, so you got money in for maintenance. Why isn't your maintenance director doing a 5-year plan?
We're actually in the process of that.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're correcting that? Okay.
Yeah, because we transitioned directors.
Right.
So last year we went for a lot of the year without one. They hired one, you know what I mean? So it's just, we've had a disruption. So that is in process.
And when's the last time you did an energy use audit for the buildings?
We are actually in the process of establishing that, and that would be something that will be voted on by the board next week to establish a new contract with the company.
Okay.
We've
And I
done
heard,
that in the past, though, right, with Siemens, I mean, prior to my arrival, but Siemens.
I shouldn't recommend them, but Siemens did us well. We actually did a $2 million project, which they guaranteed the savings. And if we didn't save it every month, they sent us a check.
Yeah, we did the same thing.
Yeah, good. Just want to make sure.
Thank you.
On your technology that you do your one-to-one, I assume that's on a rotation basis, because you don't buy, what is it, 1,200 or whatever all at once.
Yeah, we would buy kindergarten and third grade, those kids, we keep those devices
Okay.
until they get to the next grade level. So the kindergartners will keep their devices until grade 3, then they'll, so it'll be the same amount each year for that one group to purchase.
Okay, unless there's more kids.
There's always that.
Yes, well, we can hope, right? No. I just have a curiosity. No, I'll do that. I'll email you that one. That's not bad. Now, on the Essential Services Program, do you still get 10% more for, I know it's not special needs now, I forget the word, but.
Yeah, there is similar to that increased funding for economically disadvantaged students. The funding formula also provides increased funding for students who are identified as having special education. Yep.
Let's see. How many buses do we have on the road?
21.
21? So your oldest bus is going to be 10 or 11 years old before you replace it?
Yes.
Okay. I can email you some particulars on how you order your buses and what you order.
We will figure that out.
Okay.
Send it along.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Oh, I just had a question on the food. I heard you say that the food is bid out, so do you have a contract?
Yeah, we belong to a purchasing co-op, there's 21 districts in the mid-Maine area. So we go out as a group and select our prime distributor, it's usually Cisco, PFG, or Dennis Paper Food Service. Right now it's Dennis Paper Food Service out of Hamden. And then we bid out for milk and bread as well. So the challenge is when our bid awardee doesn't have the product in stock and we need that product, we're having to buy it from a secondary supplier and not giving us the best prices. We try to minimize those types of transactions, of course, but
I guess that's my contention. If I had a contract with you, it's up to me to find the stuff and give it to you. Even if I have to go buy it. I'm sorry.
You're a little over time, so I think if your suggestion or your indication that you were going to email some along, that way we can answer these questions as we go through the specific warrant articles, because I think most times when people have questions, you're not the only one. You're not the only one with the questions, but you were just brave enough to ask them, so it's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other folks, comments for this session? If not, remind everyone that our next budget work session is March 9th at 6 p.m. at Leeds Central School. And you will find on the website which warrant articles specifically will be discussed at that meeting as well, so you can kind of keep track of if there's a particular warrant article you're specifically interested in, or you had specific questions that you're interested to hear the answers to as it pertains to those, then make sure to keep track of those. So that brings us to our agenda item 3, act on the minutes of the 10th regular meeting, and that was February 9th. Any errors or omissions on that one? Seeing none, accept that under general consent. That brings us to public comment. Go back to public comment again. Same guidelines as I just read off for folks. Do we have people interested in speaking?
Madam Chair,
Yep. Yeah, if you would like to introduce yourself, please, and let us know what's in front of you, that'd be great.
My name is Jo Brackett, and I'm a resident of Leeds. More importantly, I'm the grandmother of an 8th grader and a junior in the school system. I would like to address the controversy that has been occurring over the book Genderqueer being added to the high school library. The book is found to be offensive to some and acceptable to others. I have a proposal that could possibly be acceptable by both sides of this issue. I would like to propose that this particular book be placed in a designated area where only 18 and older students can sign it out, and students under 18 years of age will have to have written parental consent to sign it out of the library. Approving this policy will allow MSAD 52 parents some control over their children being exposed to this controversial subject matter that is being indoctrinated in this book. And this book is the very definition of indoctrination. That is teaching someone to accept a set of beliefs without questioning them. There is a reason why our society has ratings on such things as movies, videos, video games, and TV shows. Many parents do not want their children exposed to material that is intended for a more mature audience. What we want in school is education, not indoctrination. Thank you.
We have other folks that are interested in speaking.
Crystal Nicholas from Green. Sexually inappropriate material is finding its way into libraries in every county in this country. Popping up like sores in the wake of the ESSER grant, these books are clearly safe and effective for other people's children, just not the children of those people who voted to have your children exposed to them. Mental health consequences and ruined lives have already been reported, but what does this look like? For starters, parents and students alike no longer consider libraries to be welcoming places to browse safely. More and more parents are restricting their children's access to libraries in order to protect them from damaging content. One child, a 13-year-old girl, exhibits a mental health consequence. "Mom," she says, "I had the strangest dream last night. I dreamed we were at a school board meeting, and instead of hiding all the inappropriate books, they had them on display during the meeting so that the parents had to look at them." "Oh dear," responded her mother, "I'm sorry that you could find nothing better to dream about." "But it wasn't just that, Mom. There was one book I couldn't help but see. It was called A Middle Schooler's Guide to Sexually Disturbing Images." For our next adverse reaction, we hear of a volume that by some miracle is not already in our libraries. This book of over 100 pages shows multiple cartoon drawings of boys, men, girls, and women, in no particular order or combination, totally naked and engaged in performing sex acts, with or without accessories. Ostensibly for ages 10 and up, actual use of this book has bled down to younger children. I personally met the lovely retired couple who had the unenviable honor of having their lives ruined by this life-saving book. When their granddaughter was 9, the little girl was sexually loved by her 12-year-old brother and his male friend, who cited this book as their guide. The girl thought that she could escape the boy's loving if she were to become a man, so she asked her mother if she could transform. One Amazon review of this same book minces no words. "They started teaching this book at my son's school, so I bought this book to see what it's all about. I am taking my son out of the school." I'm willing to wager that both the retired couple as well as the author of the Amazon review are thrilled by this materials being pushed on their families and being told to be grateful for a school replete with constitutional rights. Those constitutional rights are kind of slippery. You want them to deal with school policy that conflicts with human rights, but those school lawyers are clever and skillful at manipulation, and all you're left with is a feeling that you've been had and a brand new copy of A Middle Schooler's Guide to Sexually Disturbing Images, paid for by your tax dollars. Thank you.
I just had a question about how the public comment works. Am I allowed to ask questions and then you answer, or?
What we generally do in public comment, if there are questions that will be followed up at a subsequent meeting, that's what we do. The goal, as I had indicated in reading the policy, is not for debate necessarily, and that's because there wouldn't be anything that the board would take action on during this process.
I have 7 questions in regards to lacrosse, and I was just wondering if you could maybe write them down and get back to me at a later time.
Would you like to email the superintendent?
Sure.
That would be great, because then I can
Okay.
have them all and I can look.
Okay. Is it still okay to ask, or no?
Yeah, you can certainly ask them, but if you email them as well, that
Okay.
ensures.
I was just wondering, what are the requirements to allow a co-op sport? And I was wondering why we as parents need permission from the school to allow our child to play at another school if the school doesn't offer the program and another school allows our child to play? That's a two-part question. Also, what is the potential cost for co-op sport? I'm also wondering why in years past it's been shut down by the athletic director and school admin if parents in the past have offered to fund it and provide transportation. Is there any way we could try a 2-year co-op trial? Give the parents, the boosters, an opportunity to raise the money? If the fear of losing too many baseball or softball players is part of the issue, why not offer a co-op for those sports as well? I've heard in the past that bus transportation has also been an issue, but I'm wondering why if there's fewer sports in the spring versus fall. Also, I've heard that we might be investing in esports, and I'd like to say I personally would rather see my child out on a field getting physical activity rather than behind a screen where they can do that at home. Thank you for your consideration.
It would be awesome if you could follow up with an email, because there's a lot there, and I want to make sure that I get those answers.
No
straight.
problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Brackett again. Can't get rid of me like a bad penny. I just want to make a comment, just for thought. And I read a lot. And I try to keep up on what's going on around our country. And I don't know if I'm sure everybody's aware of what's going on in Florida, because that's everywhere. And I just read about Tennessee Senate working on going all the way to the right on the LGBT alphabet, I guess. So I guess I would encourage you to really look at this subject. There is a silent minority out there that is not here, and I don't think you want them here, because they will swing the pendulum all the other way, just like they are now in several states. And just, I think you've got to give something back to this controversial, I don't care if it's that book, there's several books, I know there is. And I don't even know necessarily if it's controversial just because it's about sex. Probably if I went to the library and read them all, I'd probably find a few others that, maybe talks about suicide or those kinds of things. So I just really want to encourage the board to try to come up with a compromise so that we don't end up pushing all the way to the right. That's all I have. Thanks.
Jimmy Childs from Leeds. I promise you, I'm not the enemy here. I'm just trying to fight for my kids, like board members here fight for theirs, and willing to risk their reputation and everything to do so. I applaud that. There's over 361 pieces of legislation being circulated through our country to do with child mutilation, to do with gender confusion, to do with the explicit materials in the schools. 361 pieces. I mean, that should mean that there's something that this school board and the people should look at. It might be just a few of us here to talk about this, but I have circled the town and talked to the people, and the majority is out there. They all feel this way. I do this because I love my kids. The internet policy where it prohibits sexual explicit content and language, it's a great one. I'd like to propose a policy to where the library media material should hold to the same standards. It does the same for mental damage as it does for the internet. So maybe I can propose that policy at a later date. I've proposed a lot of policies, I've written a lot of stuff, I went through material that I have a tote full of stuff that I shouldn't even have to go through. But I have it, and I did the research, I did the homework. My math teacher always said, show me your work. You can easily look onto somebody else's desk and do the thing, but show me your work. Show me why this equity is so important to our school, and show me that it is not harming our kids. Show me the gender curriculum is okay, and it's not arbitrary, and it is not hurting our kids. Because as much as I want every kid to be successful, people that are confused about things, that's a problem. And because people are confused, they shouldn't be able to make everybody else in society go with their confusion. So, thank you.
Yep. Christine Duplessis, 2 kids in the district. Could I see who was taking notes for the meeting tonight? Chair, who's taking notes for the meeting tonight?
Oh, yeah, the official notes were prepared by the assistant superintendent and voted on by the board.
Okay.
You'll notice that in our agenda.
Yep, could you please document what I'm saying in the minutes? Also,
Our practice with minutes, as we discussed at the last meeting, is to, and I'll pause this so you can come back and finish up for us, is to create a broad strokes representation of the meeting. It is not word by word.
no, but what's happening is certain things aren't getting recorded in the meeting minutes.
These meetings are all...
I'm following Robert's Rules of
live,
Order
and
right
those are
now,
recorded.
and it states in here that, let's see, to even have a little meeting, 3 minutes. Also, that, hang on 1 second, I've been studying up on this. Yes, I am allowed to see who is taking the minutes for tonight, and I can also ask to have this documented. It is in here, and if you need me to cite page and numbers, I can. Just making that notated.
And we just indicated who's taking the notes.
Okay.
And as everyone's aware, those minutes are voted on, and they're not official, they're voted on by the board.
Okay. Also, Secretary, would you please record that Betsy Bullard admitted that the posters I provided last meeting she thought were to be considered pornography. This isn't just a district issue, this is nationwide. I would also like to propose a policy change on your book challenge. The very person who is bringing the questionable material into the schools, Ms. Lashman, is one of the ones reading and voting on these books. Slight conflict of interest. So I'd like to work on a policy to include more community members, things like that. Come on. Thank you.
And if you'd like to provide that citation in Robert's Rules, I'd be happy to hear that as well.
Perfect.
Thanks.
In 1 moment.
You can just email it to me, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have other folks that are interested in speaking? If not, we can continue along our agenda. Brings us to communications. Carrie.
Yes, I'd like to report a resignation. Lori Hersey, bus driver, effective February 17th, and 1 additional substitute at Turner Primary School, effective February 13th.
Brings us to adjustments to the agenda. Carrie.
Thank you. I added 1 item at the end to consider remote learning days for additional students. It's the only change.
Brings us to committee reports, finance committee reports. That was
So there was not a finance committee meeting tonight, so there's not a report.
So the next meeting for finance is scheduled for March 23rd, 5 p.m. at Turner Elementary School. 7.2, Plant Transportation Building. Joe McLean.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. We did have a PTB meeting this evening. 2 primary issues. One, dealing with the wastewater treatment plant. One of the greatest things that I think I heard tonight was that there are some additional state grant opportunities potentially available to help us solve this problem. And we are pursuing those, and that is exciting. We're also continuing to work with our consultants on developing solutions there, so more to come on that. And we continue to discuss the proposals received for the energy audit. The energy audit, that we're doing? Okay. And my hope is that we'll be making a recommendation next week, or next meeting. I can't remember if it's next, I don't think it's next week, but at our next meeting for who we intend to select for that. So, that was it.
Curriculum policy, Jamie.
We did not meet tonight, and our next meeting is scheduled for next week, so March 9th at 5 p.m. at Leeds.
Brings us to 7.4, and that is Tri-Town Education Association's Teachers, TTEA. Jessica.
We have not met.
Student representative report. Nayla, you're all on tonight. Sorry about that.
We have like an arts gala coming up, and I know Unified has a snowshoe Special Olympics next week, which is exciting. But I also thought it was important to say, in terms of the budget, that it's really important to the students to have a wheelchair accessible bleachers. I have a video of Cambry talking about it, but yeah, I mean, it is sort of the law, and we would love for everyone to be included. So.
It's all past vacation now, but how did the Winter Carnival, everyone enjoy that? That was festive?
Sore subject.
Oh. Uh-oh.
The seniors
Did you
did not
lose?
win.
What about aside from that one?
Aside from that, sorry. It's all about perspective, isn't it, Kyle?
When is the gallery? Our gala?
It starts like next Thursday, I want to say. Yeah, and then it ends the week after that-ish. Like next.
Wednesday the 15th.
Yes.
Will be our gala night.
What is it?
I believe it's Wednesday the 15th. It's our gala night, but you'll all be getting an invitation.
Administrative reports, none, because we had the opportunity to hear from folks earlier. Assistant Superintendent's report, Teresa.
So I just have two things to report on. Last time I mentioned that I have been partaking in the book clubs offered through the Department of Education with the multi-tier system of support specialist. This past week, our book was entitled Effective Universal Instruction. It was truly it's going to be a great resource for our curriculum work, so I'm very excited about that. And on February 15th, before our winter break, we had another clinical day. It was led by Amy Musso, who is our instructional coach here at Green Central School. These days allow for our instructional coaching team to work together. And as the host coach, Amy set the schedule for the day, and she asked for and received feedback on some of her coaching practices. We have another one in March, which I believe is at Levitt.
Brings us to the superintendent's report.
Yep, so I'd just like to say thank you. I sent out a notice to all the staff today, but I don't know if anyone noticed, but it was a little challenging this morning, and the transportation department knocked it out of the park and safely got kids to school in conditions that we did not anticipate getting that hairy that quickly. So they did a great job, and I just want to say that out loud. You have a revised list of school board meetings in your packet. It's the only thing that's different is Martha realized that we had like numbered them wrong, like 16th meeting, 17th, so she's just corrected them. Nothing else has changed. We are going to be, so as you know, Andrea is retiring as our payroll specialist, and so we want to put ourselves in a position to make sure that that transition goes really well, because payroll is, if not the most important thing that happens here, it's pretty darn close. So we'll be looking to hire Andrea's replacement on June 1st, which is a month before Andrea's done. This would be at a cost of about $6,200. We've identified funds primarily in the fact, we hired Gabby late, so there is remaining salary that won't be spent. In addition, she took a different benefits package that was cheaper than what was budgeted. So we have identified funds to be able to pay for that position in that 1 month overlap, and that will ensure that we're set up to start
the next fiscal year in a good position. So I just wanted to let you know that that ad is going to go out tomorrow. We're hoping to collect some great applicants. If you want to be a payroll specialist in the awesome SAD 52 school district, you should send it in. Working with Gabby is the best. And then we'll use that month for training. So Andrew will still be on board and we will have a smooth transition. So we're super excited about that. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Old business, we do not appear to have any, so that brings us to new business. 9.1, consideration and discussion of new district logo.
So just looking for some feedback on this. Kelly Cabral, who works in adult ed, is also like supremely talented artist. She does the budget book. She's got a lot of skills. I asked her to start working on this in the fall because it just really bothered me that we didn't have some kind of a symbol or something. So this administrators have looked at this and it's sort of where we settled. There's a couple other designs. What was on the first page of the first slide in the presentation also was another one of her designs where it had the picture of the bridge with the green around it. So we're hoping to improve the look of our marketing materials, start to update some things on the website, all those things. So comments, anything people want to say about it?
Oh, you go ahead.
Jeremy.
I was going to ask if we had one, because I looked and it was like, I don't remember us ever having one, so I like the idea, and I really like, for me, Turner Leeds and Green has always been very pastoral, and I do think that is very good, so I like it.
I was going to ask if there's a cost associated with this.
Paying Kelly's time because she did work for us outside of her adult ed, so it's that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other thoughts?
Is there more options than just this?
I can show you the other options that we looked at.
Yeah.
This design, I will say, was settled on pretty quickly. It used to have different colors, and we moved them towards more of the green because that green is really just that consistent color theme within the district. So I can show you some different colors, but this particular one was we started looking them, I would say October, November maybe, and this one was pretty sort of, because it has that river and it's got the river and the hills and sort of everyone just sort of like, whoa, that kind of fits. So. But I'm happy to share with you other ones.
I'm just curious, like, just for, to look what kind of designs was going into it a little bit.
This one was pretty right off the bat.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh my gosh. The blue colors were lovely, but we did move to the green.
Yeah.
From a process standpoint, would you like the board to take some sort of action on a new district logo?
We don't have to do it tonight. I wanted to give people a chance. Yep.
So back to the next one, it's those other options.
Yep, and I'll share with people what else we looked at.
Great. So we'll see that again, and I would just say a logo seems much more appealing than no easily identifiable logo, and certainly, as you said, also some of the marketing opportunities. 9.2, approval of fundraiser for Green Central School student ambassadors to raise monies for coins for caring camels. Do we have a motion on that one? Jessica? Do we have a second on that? Second. Jamie? Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? 9.3, approval of donation for a $50 gift card from Hannaford for Tripp Middle School's VEX Robotics Club. Do we have a motion on this one?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. Second, Mrs. Tammy. Move in on this one. Discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.4, second reading and adoption of revised policy GCOC, evaluation of administrative staff. Do we have a motion on this one? Do we have a second? discussion on this one? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.5, first reading and acceptance of revised policy IHBAJ, extended school year. We have a motion on this one. Jeannie? We have a second. Jessica? Discussion on this one. Jessica?
It looks like there's some changes, if anyone wants to talk about that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we had Rebecca Drysdale go through look at it, and there was just some changes made through the unified special education regulation that put into effect new.
Yes, so this is more in line with the Chapter 101, rules and regulations for special education, than what was there before.
Do they no longer have to have a history of regression to meet criteria or be based off IEP recommendations?
Well, so regression is not in the law. It talks about the recoupment of skills and the time it takes to recoup those skills, which means also regression, but they've regressed over time. They address it is more of a recoupment model, and so that's what we do to measure when students come back after lapses of instruction, how long it's taking them along with their identified disability.
Thank you.
Further discussion on this one? If not, all those in favor? Unanimous. Brings us to 9.6, first reading and acceptance of revised policy IJOA, field trips and other student travel. Do we have a motion on that one? Amy, do we have a second? Amy, thank you. Any discussion on this one?
It looks like the next item, 9.7, I think somehow related here, like we're deleting one and adding to the other.
Correct.
What is the?
Yeah, it was
driver there?
basically just repetitive. So field trips and, so now we just made it field trips and other student travel instead of there being a travel study because they're the same thing, essentially. So the idea was to make less policies instead of more. So I'm forgetting the specifics, Teresa. Do you remember, like, if there was anything specific that was changed?
We referred to the main school management policy, and I think the committee agreed that it was important to have, as you described, to have a concise policy that dealt with any student travel, whether it be field trips, overnight, like if sometimes the board has to vote on when, or there's an out-of-state or an overnight trip.
Right.
And then also just to delineate that study abroad or those sorts of trips are not affiliated with the school necessarily.
And MSMA also only has this one policy recommendation, not they don't have two separate policies for this either.
Other discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to 9.7, and that is deletion of policy IHCB, travel study. Do we have a motion on that one? Sandy?
I'll second.
Kyle. Discussion on this one. And this, just to reiterate, this is recommended to be deleted because it would be redundant to have. Other discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to 9.8. That is approval of December expenditure and operating reports. Do we have a motion on that one? Jessica, do we have a second?
Second.
Joe? Discussion on this one? Kathy?
You want some highlights?
Any? Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
So in the year-to-date revenue report, the interest earned is at $12,000, which is $7,000 more than we had budgeted for. That just goes towards our increase in the budget amount for next fiscal year. In the net asset summary, the first page, the fund balance for adult education, you'll see that it started, this is the first column, the beginning balance, it started at a negative $65,000. This was because that transfer that I was talking about earlier did not take place. It has since been done, effective for fiscal year 22, per the auditor's instruction. Also, the fund balance for patients Norman started out at a negative $359. This is related to FICA and or Medicare expenses for amounts that are awarded as prizes. When we get the money, they don't take that into account, so it's a district expense. That has been offset by miscellaneous revenue, so we took care of that. Also, down at the bottom of that page, the fund balance for the national board certification. This is actually money that we received in fiscal year 21 and 22. It was spent and given to the teachers who were awarded the funds. However, it was spent out of the general fund and it was put into this fund incorrectly. So I have made that transfer on the guidance of auditors, so that is cleared up as well.
Further discussion on the expenditure and operating reports. There's none. All those in favor? Unanimous. 9.9, consideration and approval of remote learning days for any additional snow day cancellations. We have a motion on that, and then we can hear some more details about what that might entail. Jamie, second?
I'm not clear what the motion is.
So that would be the approval of the remote learning days? I'm stating accurately.
Yes, yes. Who seconded? Tammy?
Oh, yep. So if, Carrie, you could describe to folks what that.
So remote learning days were really not an option because the rules around lunch required us to provide it in a congregate setting where kids are eating live, and that if we did not provide it that manner, we would not be able to get subsidy. Right before vacation, the rules changed. Right before February vacation, we got notification, and Dave, if I misspeak, please correct me. We got notification that the Maine Department of Ed had sought a waiver from the federal government. They received word right before February vacation that in fact we could ask for a waiver around storm days. So the principals and I and Teresa and Rebecca met Tuesday right after vacation in a normal meeting, but the timing worked out, and one of the things we talked about was whether or not to consider remote days for all snow days going forward. Tuesday we met during the snow day on Zoom. We were all home during the snow day, the 5th snow day. So we are at 5 snow days, which gets us out of school on Friday, June 16th. There's a couple of things that we think this would benefit us. Going past June 16th, it would put us, if we had another snow day, it would put us in school through June 20th, which includes Juneteenth, which is now a holiday. So there's some expense to the district by having school go beyond that holiday, be a paid holiday, for positions who earn holiday pay. We would have a half day of school on that 20th if we were to have an additional snow day. There is some talk, there's always talk in other districts, and I know teachers here have talked about moving our March workshop day to June. We put a lot of time and energy into those workshop days, and what you do in June versus what you do in March are very, very different things. So not having that day for training in March to prevent us from having to go to school on June 20th is not preferred. Having that final date set for what the end of the year is. The high school is going to be doing Hive Week, and so there may be things that they are scheduling that having that final day known is important.
And then we all know, like, going past into those later weeks of June, things, whether or not what's happening in schools and whether or not kids are fully engaged, it starts to become questionable. I'll say that in as nice a way as I can. However, I'd also like to say, and I think the principals would want me to say this, that in-person learning is 100% the best thing to do, and so remote learning certainly wouldn't be a one-to-one replacement for that. We've all lived through that. We know that's the case. But we do think we can put together a plan that would be sufficient and would allow us those additional benefits of having an end to the school year that's defined. There are several school districts around us who've already been doing this. We weren't sure quite how they were doing that. Teresa's been doing some research. Some of them have just decided to give up the subsidy for food on that day. I don't know what else you've heard.
There has been a question around pay for employees, but in some districts, the bus drivers are actually also custodians. So they still are working, and then they have alternate plans.
So we would need, the only employees that we would need to make plans for to ensure that they receive that day of pay would be bus drivers and food service, right? So those are the two categories of workers that would not have a role on a remote day, but we can easily plan. There's plenty to do with those two groups of employees to make sure that they earn that day of pay. It may not be on that day, but we would make an alternative agreement. So before we go too much farther in making a plan, and obviously, you know, if there's a snow day on Monday, like, we're not sure we could pull that off anyway. But it seemed to be, the opportunity was available. It seemed to be the responsible thing to do to consider it and put it before you guys to determine if you thought it was worthy for us to continue to investigate that.
Some discussion. Is this, the way this is set up just for this year? It wouldn't be...
Yeah, because I don't know if the rules are going to change again. So this is literally just because the rule changed 2 weeks ago and we have the opportunity to do it now. So this would be just for this year. This is not committing us to anything beyond this.
Discussion.
So, do we know that families are going to have access to?
That's part of what we need to work out. I mean, we have one-to-one devices, so it's a matter of making
For
sure that...
everybody?
Yes. Yep. We had that set up during the pandemic and it's remained in place, and that's part of why the budget is now including those. It's time to replace them.
Are children, though, allowed to just take those devices home?
Yeah, people sign a permission slip that allows that. It's not common, especially at the lowest levels, but it is happening in cases all throughout the district.
Even the little ones.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know how often the little ones take them home. I don't think it's happening at Turner Primary. I think it happens once they get to like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So I think it's the primary ones where when we've had the conversation, there's going to probably need to be the most sort of work to get things going, but lots of families have experience with this, unfortunately.
I know that during the pandemic, we were able, people got Verizon, like little hotspots and stuff like that. Is that going to be, or I guess how many of those were given out during that time frame, and then would that be an issue?
I can't speak to that, and I do think it's likely there might be some internet issues for a small number of families.
Especially, I guess, during a snowstorm too, with this, like,
Yeah, and that's no different than, you know, when we were doing hybrid or during the shutdown and kids didn't have internet. It's just like, no big deal. Like, you know, no harm, no foul. We're not going to hold you accountable if it's not, you know, you couldn't do it. I mean, we can imagine a family getting a device at home and it's not charged up so it doesn't turn on, or they can't figure out how to do it. Like, we're not going to hold the kid accountable for that.
And I was going to say, one of the workarounds that we did before was that there was physical paper packets available too. So it wasn't an all or nothing. If the internet or the device was an issue, there was physical paper packets available too. I was going to ask a question regarding the food services. So in the past, I remember that it was very important that we still had to feed the child, even though it wasn't in the school. So do we have systems in place that we can go back to that day where you can put together?
Yeah, we talked about that at the meeting. I met with all the managers, so they can come up with a short-term plan to provide meals. In the past, we've ordered the shelf-stable meals, which has been very difficult to get now because now the pandemic's over, nobody wants those meals, and you got to order them 2 weeks in advance and get 7 pallet minimum. So They can do minimal perishable foods distributed at the end of the day to include a milk. We put a sticker on the Ziploc saying put this in the fridge when you get home, so it wouldn't be exposed to temperature controls for that short amount of time, but it's very doable. My biggest concern is that we don't find out about snow day at 2:15 p.m. You know, we need to find out, you know, probably 10 o'clock in the morning would be ideal. Make sure we have those products available and then just team up on graphical meals.
Yes, and we also in our research know that there are school districts who have a remote day that's a planned and a remote day that's unplanned, and sort of what that looks like. I think to be very, very honest, like, we will not have a perfect plan, and there will be glitches. I think the question is, where's the greater, the sort of the better outcome in terms of the financial piece that comes with extending the school year beyond the 19th and the potential benefits versus, you know, we will have glitches. It won't be perfect. Like, families won't, you know, somebody won't have their device. I think we did talk about doing some paper things for the youngest kids as backup, but we also don't want to sort of like ramp up this ginormous machine for one potential day, right? So I think we will develop what we think is a reasonable plan, but it's not going to be like, you know, when we knew kids were going to be home for weeks on end or something like that. So I just want to make sure that I'm setting those expectations correctly. And we're using those plans that have already been developed by other districts that seem to be working pretty smoothly.
So the gist of what I'm getting is that we're going to vote on an approval for a remote learning day to hopefully spare us from having to continue into that next week, add expenditures on. And the expectations that we're approving for that remote learning day are that we are going to come up with a plan. It's not going to be perfect. No one's going to be punished if it isn't perfect. But it will hopefully save us from having to go into June 19th, 20th, 21st.
Correct.
And we'll try to get food to people on when we think there might be a snow day the next day, but that might not be perfect either. But that's what we're expecting.
Yes.
Okay.
Very transparent.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying for.
Other discussion on this one?
I just have one other point that I'd like to throw out there. If we do get to try this, it would be really, I think, important to hear from teachers and parents and students. How did that feel? Because the possibility of that happening in future years, you know, just something to build up. That would just be the only other thing.
Tammy, you didn't live through remote learning.
I know. I can 100% say that no one's voting to like, yeah, let's do it. It's awesome. But you know, Kristen came to the meeting having heard teachers organically tell, we could make this work. Let's do. I mean, the conversation already happening, regardless of whether or not we're bringing this up. I think when we hit day 5 and everyone's looking at the calendar, I think the conversation generated itself. The feedback that Teresa's gotten from other districts is that there's really not been controversy around it. Like, people recognize and understand that we're really just trying to manage the time that's in the calendar. I mean, preferably we could have said, you know, after 5, you know, back in September, we could have said after 5 snow days, we're going to go remote and everybody would know, but that's not how this played out. The rules have changed midstream, and so it's a matter of trying to come up with a reasonable plan in a short amount of time. Maybe we don't need it.
So both of those points, both the one that Tammy made and Carrie's indication there, may be something that the board wants to think about this next year when it talks about snow days. Is there something like that? Is it some desire for them to a certain number, up to a certain number, to be, okay, it's a snow day, and then is it after that, are they remote or something like that?
Is it, realistically, it's just lifting the current regulations stating that you have to make it up on an additional snow day, so you, in theory, actually, I lost my train of thought, but I'm just thinking about something.
So we have to have a certain number of student days, and what was preventing us from doing a remote student day that the state of Maine allows you to do was this subsidy piece around food and making sure that we were following the regulations and that they have to be eating in a congregate setting and all those things. And so now that that rule's allowing us to waiver, we can now access this other option.
And there's no funding that comes along with it at all, right?
Other discussion?
The whole time I was thinking just about planning, and how challenging that might be. Like you said, a 2:15 notice may be really hard to work with. And at this point, I just feel like we should maybe, and I don't know if this motion is for this to be the case or at the superintendent's option to be the case, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I can't predict what the weather's going to do. We can't, right?
Right, but I think that's, sometimes you need to call it really at the end, and sometimes it's well known we have, big storm coming, and I almost wonder, I feel like that's a big influence in how I think about this. If we can plan on it and make sure everyone can get home with the device, as opposed to, it feels like it'd be more productive if we could have that kind of warning. So I don't know. Again, I just
I mean, I think it would be a conversation.
Freedom to make that decision.
Right, it doesn't mean if we voted yes to accept this, it doesn't mean that we have to accept it the day of the storm or something. You're like, and this ain't gonna be worth doing it, so we're just gonna.
Right, and I think Jamie stated it pretty well, that, I mean, I don't think, with the motion under consideration, I believe that the understanding is that this gives the superintendent this option to have a remote day. I mean, I think we're still going to have to trust the superintendent and the transportation folks' expertise in whether we need to have school, whether it's safe to have buses and employees and kids on the road or not, and when that call needs to be made too. And that gets back to Tammy's question about feedback afterwards. Like, so do we do it? And okay, so that didn't work great. What do we need to fix about it? Or, well, you know what, that worked a lot better than we thought it would. So I also would trust and hope that we get that feedback as well going forward. Is this something that we want to continue as a process and work into our kind of regular rotation kind of thing or not? Other discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous? Opposed? You're opposed? You're abstaining? You may be I know, I'm like, you're a senior, so you.
I don't want to do remote days.
Nobody wants, let's be clear, nobody wants to do remoteness. But you actually don't care about school on June 20th.
Exactly.
You will be long gone, so there's that.
My mom said she'd sacrifice for me, actually. She would go extra time so I could go less time.
Thank you, and thank her as well. So our only remaining agenda item is 9.10, and that's a request for an executive session to discuss the employment of officials, appointees, employees pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A. Do we have a motion for that? Jessica, do we have a second? Kyle, I think you got it this time.
That's who I saw, so.
You get beat every time.
All those in favor? Unanimous.
So, Doug, the library's open, right? Is the library open? So we just walk right down the hall of the library? Okay.
And we'll